Piping with cord. Dresses and products can be beautified in a variety of ways. Decorative seams like piping with cord can be used to this end as well. Basically, it is a simple piping with a small cord inside it that is used to outline the seam. This way the seam is highlighted and it looks very beautiful too. It is this piping with cord that we are going to learn in this class. Objectives: at the end of this class, you will be able to identify piping with cord, sew a piping with cord. What is piping with cord? Piping can also be done with a cord on garments or products. This is a fabric strip cut on the bias and folded over the cord. Let's see how to do piping with cord on a sample. The procedure of sewing a piping with cord. You will need the following items to do this sample. Cotton fabric. Another color cotton fabric for piping. Cord. Straight ruler.
Pattern square.
Straight pins. Measuring tape, tailor's chalk, shears, small scissors, contrasting thread, iron, sewing machine. Now let's begin. Step 1. Measure, mark, and cut out the sample fabric pieces. At the outset, take 2 layers of cotton fabric. Measure and draw 10-inch by 10-inch square on it. With the help of a ruler,
Pattern square.
measuring tape, and a tailor's chalk. Using the shears, cut the marked squares. Step 2. Mark the seam allowance. Now take one of the fabric pieces and lay it on the table with its wrong side up. Using
Pattern square.
measuring tape and tailor's chalk, mark 1-inch seam allowance along one of its cut edges. Step 3. Prepare the fabric strip for piping. Measure and mark at 45-degree angle to the fabric grain . A 10-inch long and 2.5-inch wide strip of another fabric. Cut along the marked lines. Fold this strip in half and press it with an iron. Step 4. Insert the cord in the fabric strip. Insert a 10-inch thin cord in the fold. Hold the cord in place with hand basting stitches. Step 5. Place in position the folded strip with cord on the sample. Now take the two pieces with the right side together and in between insert the folded strip with the cord along the seam edges facing outside. Pin all the 4 layers together with the marked seam line on the upper side. Step 6. Change the normal presser foot to zipper foot. Before we start stitching, change the normal presser foot to a zipper foot. The zipper foot is less wide and will allow us to stay in line with the seam line next to the thick cord. Step 7. Stitch the seam. Now we will start stitching. Press the reverse stitch lever and start with the reverse stitch to prevent the seam from opening. Leave the reverse stitch lever and stitch along the seam line with a normal stitch length. Again, press the reverse stitch lever and end with the reverse stitch to prevent the seam from opening. Snip the thread with a pair of small scissors and remove the straight pins. Remove the basting stitches too. Step 8. Press the seam line. Press the seam line with an iron. Then open the fabric and the seam allowance so that the right sides of the fabric are no longer together. Then press the seam next to the piping with cord. Finally, you have your sample with the piping with cord in seam ready. Please note, here we are using a contrasting thread for demonstration purposes only so that it is visible, but otherwise one would use a thread matching to the fabric. With that, we come to the end of this class. Let's recall what we have learned in this class. Piping can also be done with a cord on garments or products. This is a fabric strip cut on the bias and folded over the cord. The procedure of sewing piping with cord. Let's review its basic steps. Step 1. Measure, mark and cut out the sample fabric pieces. Step 2. Mark the seam allowance. Step 3. Prepare the fabric strip for piping. Step 4. Insert the cord in the fabric strip. Step 5. Place in position the folded strip with cord on the sample. Step 6. Change the normal presser foot to a zipper foot. Step 7. Stitch the seam. Step 8. Press the seam line. This is piping with cord. So now you have learned all about piping with cord. Take our next class to learn about the single top stitch seam.